0 wins, 40 losses. What you're about to witness is not a bad week, not a rough patch, but a terrible Overwatch team. Probably the worst Overwatch team in existence. 40 matches and did not win a single game at all. This is the 2018 Shanghai Dragons. To understand the Overwatch League, let's first talk about how it started and what it is. Well, the Overwatch League is Blizzard's attempt to build a traditional city-based esports league, like the NFL, but for people that play games and for nerds. But there are 12 teams, also known as franchises, selling for millions of dollars, real investors, and real stakes. And every single team in this league was stacked with professionals who have been playing competitively for years. But this wasn't some open bracket. You had to be genuinely elite to even be here. And then there is Shanghai. Well, let's talk about the Shanghai Dragons' first problem. Their roster was entirely made up of Chinese players, which I'm not trying to sound racist in any way, which sounds fine until you realize that China's domestic Overwatch scene in 2018 was not exactly world class. Okay, while the teams like Seoul Dynasty and the San Francisco Shock were pulling from Korea's hyper-competitive ladder, arguably the best players on the planet, Shanghai was building a team around players who had largely never faced anybody or any level of competition in the Overwatch League. They also had a coach, by multiple accounts, that the team had been practicing from 10:30 in the morning until midnight every single day. Not exactly a recipe for peak performance. And then, believe it or not, visas happened. 2 of their better players, including Gejuri, correct me if I'm wrong, would later become one of the most famous players in Overwatch League history. But he couldn't even make it to the United States in time to play the first 2 stages. Shanghai were essentially playing shorthanded while simultaneously being outclassed. Oh, and mid-season they dropped one of their only bright spots, a DPS player nicknamed Undead. For whatever reasons that was never fully specified or explained by Overwatch League or the team, it was beautiful, unwatchable chaos by that point. Alright, well, I mean, here's the thing though, they weren't always getting stomped. Kind of want to backcheck on that. They might have almost been easier to watch, but no. The cruelty of the 2018 Shanghai Dragons was that they were close sometimes. They'd take maps off of top teams. You'd see a flash, a moment where you thought, oh, okay, maybe today is a day. Undead popping off on a Widowmaker, a team fight going their way. And then the wheels would come off every single time. Their match against the Florida Mayhem, late in the season became legendary. Florida was also having a rough year. Both teams were near the bottom. The Overwatch community held its collective breath. Somebody had to win this thing. Florida won. The arena went dead silent. Casters struggled to find words. Thousands of people watching online felt something they didn't expect to feel. Genuine sadness for a team they'd been laughing at for months. And that's actually when something strange happened. The internet, being the internet, started to love the Shanghai Dragons for whatever reason, ignoring the 0-40, but not in a mocking way, or at least not just in a mocking way. People started actually rooting for them. Ironically at first, then genuinely, fans made art, they made memes, they tracked every near miss and every map win like they were playoff results. The Dragons had become the ultimate underdog, not because they were scrappy and almost good, but because they were so thoroughly, historically bad that it looped back around to being compelling. There was a community tracker following their loss streak in real time. A fan once calculated that if you bet against the Shanghai Dragons every match at the beginning of the season, you've had made an almost absurd return. Their 0-40 record became a cultural artifact. Well, then Season 2 comes around. New rosters, new coaches, new hope. Though most people thought that was generous. Stage 1, Week 1, Shanghai Dragons versus the Boston Uprising. The Dragons actually won. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. People who had never cared about the Dragons were actually celebrating their wins. People who'd been watching them lose for an entire year were crying. Grown adults weeping in their gaming chairs because a team from Shanghai beat Boston in a video game. Let's take a quick little detour though. Talk about the players that made Shanghai Dragons. Roshan, one of the fastest growing tanks.
Easy pick for him.
The other team knew it.
And this should be another hold for Philly. Roshan with a little bit of help left. Now no health.
And read by the opposing team. In a meta that heavily rewarded aggressive Winston dive to play. Predictability was a death sentence, and Roshan was an open book. Opposing teams didn't have to scout him deeply, they just had to show up and wait for him to dive to come at the wrong moment. The problem wasn't just skill, it was that his entire playstyle depended on a support keeping him alive through chaotic engagements, which leads directly to the next entry. After Season 1, Shanghai released Roshan along with the most of the original Chinese roster. He never returned to a major professional stage. Next, Altering, the Mercy who literally couldn't keep anyone alive. If Roshan was diving in recklessly, Altering was the one reason those dives turned fatal. The two formed one of the most dysfunctional partnerships in Overwatch League history. Poor Mercy play from Altering, combined with Roshan's poorly timed dives, created a recipe for failure. Even when things should have gone more smoothly, Altering established a pattern of being unable to keep his key players alive, creating unwinnable conditions for Shanghai over and over again. In the 2018 meta, Mercy's primary job was to pocket a dive take or a damage dealer, and keep them in the fight just long enough to win a team fight. Altering couldn't do it consistently. The gap between what Mercy needed to do at the Overwatch League level and what Altering was actually capable of was visible every single match. Too bad he was released at the end of Season 1 along with everybody else. Well, next let's talk about Free Feel, the second worst Zenyatta in the league, statistically speaking. While Altering struggled on Mercy, the other half of Shanghai's support line was Free Fall on Zenyatta, and the numbers were terrible. Shanghai's backline struggled significantly. Free Fall Zenyatta might have been the worst performing character among the regular starters in the league. Among the 18 players qualified to have a rating on Zenyatta, Free Fall's rating was second worst in the Overwatch League. His best performance on the hero in the opening weeks was an 837 player rating according to Winston's lab. Zenyatta in 2018 was one of the most mechanically demanding supports in the game. His Orb of Discord could single-handedly swing team fights, and his ultimate was a clutch lifeline in desperate moments. The gap between Free Fall's output and what elite supports were doing at the time was enormous. He wasn't just underperforming, he was statistically in the bottom 2 of every qualified player on his signature hero. Let's talk about Jushu, the flex that just couldn't flex. Jushu was brought in as a tank player, someone who could slide between tank and support roles to adapt to whatever the meta demanded. Flexibility is only valuable, however, if you're good enough at both roles to be useful. Jushu never demonstrating that at the Overwatch level. He came in with professional gaming experience from previous esports organizations, but dude, on paper, a legitimate pedigree. In practice, the jump to Overwatch League level competition exposed his limitations across every hero he was asked to play. His inability to anchor any position consistently contributed to Shanghai's chronic issue, a team with no reliable foundation anywhere on the map. The 2018 Shanghai Dragons will never be forgotten, not because of what they won, but because of what they endured. 40 losses, an entire season of showing up, getting outclassed, and doing it again the next week. Was it embarrassing? Absolutely. Was it historic? Without question. And somewhere in the heart of every Overwatch fan who watched that 0-40 season, there's a soft spot because when they finally won, we all felt it.